So I wanted to talk about Asian longhorn beetle first. This is one that we don't think is in Michigan. We haven't found it here, but there's a lot of efforts to detect it. And it's a wood-boring insect that really likes maples. Of course, we've got a lot of maples in Michigan. It's a big concern for us. And it can be moved on firewood. It arrived from Asia on wood packing material. That's how it got to the U.S. You see the before and after pictures, what it can do to either a neighborhood or a natural forest setting where all the trees have to be removed after that comes in. This map shows all of the areas where it has become established in the eastern U.S. And these white squares show where they've been able to eradicate it. So this is an example that's a little different from some of our other pests in that it has successfully been eradicated. The biology of the insect, it doesn't fly quite as far. It's a big insect that's a little easier to identify. So hopefully, if it gets to Michigan, we can detect it early and eradicate it before it gets too far. Some of these other sites, like in Ohio and on the East Coast there, they're working on eradication efforts as well. But it had been present for a longer period of time before it was detected, and it's just a very extensive effort. The gold color here is all the maple forest, and see, certainly in Michigan, northern Michigan, a lot of maple resource there to be concerned about. So as far as what trees ALB attacks, it likes quite a variety of trees. And this isn't a complete list, but the very good hosts, it's kind of compared to eating a really good steak versus a hamburger down here with these. It still does just fine on these other tree species. But it's the maples that we're most concerned about. If you see declining maples, very common. We'll see a bunch of them here on campus with dieback at the top. That's the sort of thing that you might see, but it even takes a number of years of attack by the Asian longhorn beetle before you get to the point where it's starting to die back. So a good time to look for Asian longhorn beetle is after a storm, if there's broken branches, that sort of thing, and you can kind of see what's going on in those upper branches perhaps at that point. That's what we tell arborists, to look for that sort of thing. The branches do become brittle as you get a lot of boring activity in them, and they're not as sturdy anymore. You've got the emergence holes here, or exit holes of the insect. These are fairly large holes. I'm going to pass around some samples. You guys can get a good look at that. And you'll see some of the exit holes on these samples that pass around. There's also some oviposition pits, and I'll show you some examples of that. Actually, you can see them right here. So that's where the female will excavate a little area there and lay an egg that develops into the larvae. So you'll see these on the branch or the trunk of the tree as well. On this sample, there's a red circle around it. That's just pointing to where it is. That's not something that you'd actually see. So sometimes people will take a pencil and poke it in that hole just to see if it's large enough for that pencil to about fit in. Because you see a lot of other wood-boring insects on declining trees as well. And most of them are going to have a smaller hole, or it won't be completely round. Some of them will be more oval-shaped. If you're there at the right time of the year, during the summer, particularly late summer, there'll be more activity by the adults. And I'll pass around some of the adults as well, so you can see what those look like. And a larvae. So you can see that when these come around, it's a pretty good sized insect with very long antennae. Pretty good sized larvae when they're mature. It typically has a 1-year life cycle, especially probably further south of Michigan, possibly 2 years as you get further north, if it was in the UP perhaps. You'll also get a lot of this frass or sawdust that comes out, kind of a very fine wood shaving. I've got a whole cup of that to pass around here so you can see that as well, and that is something you might see at the base of the tree if it was being attacked, or kind of hanging on the branches of the trunk like we see there. So we get a lot of reports from the public of potential Asian longhorn beetle adults every year. And so far, we've been fortunate in that they've all turned out to be, if they look very much like the Asian longhorn beetle, they tend to be this white-spotted pine sawyer beetle. These are very active during the summer on declining and dying pines, conifers. And it's a native insect. It doesn't attack and kill healthy trees. So it's not something that we're super concerned about. It's just something that's quite common in Michigan, but it is easily confused with the Asian longhorn beetle. The easiest way to tell the difference is this white spot just behind the thorax there. And so we always encourage reports. If someone's not sure, we'd rather still get that report and make the determination ourselves, but that is the one that's probably most commonly confused with Asian longhorn beetle. Before I move on to the next pest, are there any questions about Asian longhorn beetle? Yes?
So if this beetle were to make it to Michigan, do we have any higher potential spots that we should be looking out for it at, or is it all equally high risk?
Yeah, that's a good point. I forgot to mention that. So far most of those locations where it's been detected elsewhere have tended to be urban areas, but campgrounds would be an area that we're very concerned about with firewood movement, and that's where a lot of our survey efforts occur. So I would say both urban areas and around campgrounds would be two areas that would be most concerned about. Yep.
Just a quick question about the firewood movement. I mean, was there a law or a restriction removed about movement of firewood from UP to Lower Peninsula?
Yeah, so that had to do primarily with emerald ash borer at this point, and James will talk more about emerald ash borer, but at this point that quarantine has been rescinded. So because emerald ash borer is fairly widespread in the Upper Peninsula, or becoming quite widespread at this point. So we still discourage firewood movement between peninsulas, or as short a distance as possible, but there isn't a quarantine in place for that at this point in time. There's work towards trying to get that.
So the EAD quarantine was repealed statewide, but we still have 1,000 acres disease quarantine prohibiting movement of firewood. So it's not an internal state, but it's preventing firewood coming into the state. And like Timmy was saying, that we are trying to put something together, especially at the bridge, voluntary drop-off of firewood to try to keep people from moving it, at least from the upper to the lower